I worked years to pay off my parents' debt. Now they're taking out another loan for my brother's wedding, and then I'm Luke, 29 years old. To give you a bit of background, I've spent the last 7 years of my life focused on one thing: helping my parents pay off their debts. 7 years. I was 22 when I started, just out of college, and I had all these big dreams for myself. But instead, I ended up diving headfirst into the family's financial problems, putting everything on hold to help my parents stay afloat. My parents are in their mid-50s now, and they've always struggled financially. Growing up, we were okay, but after the 2008 crash, things got rough. My dad lost his job for a while, and my mom's small business barely scraped by. When I graduated, they were drowning in debt: mortgages, credit cards, loans, you name it. They were close to losing the house a couple of times, and the stress on them was obvious. I remember coming home one weekend to find my mom crying over the bills, my dad pacing the kitchen in silence. That image just stuck with me. So, I made a choice. I put off moving out, turned down a job offer in another city, and stayed close by. I started working as a project manager at a local company, a decent job, but not exactly what I dreamed of. And I gave them most of my paycheck, every month, year after year. I covered utility bills, chipped in for groceries, helped with medical expenses. Sometimes it was exhausting, but I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once the debt was paid off, I'd get my life back. In contrast, there's my brother, Noah, who's 26 now. We've always been close, but we couldn't be more different. While I was working long hours and staying in on weekends, Noah was living his life. He got into the whole startup scene and tried launching a few projects, none of which took off. But he still had a blast. He traveled, dated, partied, and just seemed to be enjoying life without a care in the world. My parents never seemed to mind his carefree lifestyle. They even encouraged it, saying he was just finding himself. It was like they wanted to protect him from the financial mess, letting me shoulder the burden alone. And here's the thing. I didn't resent Noah. I love him. He's my little brother, and I know he didn't ask me to sacrifice for him. But I do resent the fact that my parents let me put my life on hold while they encouraged Noah to live his. They never asked him to contribute, not once. I was the responsible one, the one who would step up and make things right. Flash forward to a few weeks ago. Noah proposed to his girlfriend, Maya. She's 25, a really sweet woman with a great head on her shoulders. I'm genuinely happy for them. Maya's family has a bit more money than ours, so they've hinted at helping with the wedding, but it turns out my parents have other plans. This brings me to the bombshell I just stumbled upon. Last weekend, I was at my parents' place for dinner. Things were great. We were all laughing, sharing stories, and talking about wedding ideas for Noah and Maya. I was actually feeling pretty proud because we'd finally managed to pay off the bulk of the family's debt. After years of scrimping and saving, things were looking up, and I thought maybe this was the start of a new chapter for all of us. After dinner, my dad went into his office to grab something, and I overheard him on the phone. At first, I thought he was talking to one of his friends or maybe even a client. But then I heard him say, "Yes, we'll need the full amount. It's for my son's wedding." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what he meant. I waited until he hung up before I asked him directly, "Dad, are you taking out a loan for Noah's wedding?" He gave me this awkward smile and said, "Oh, don't worry about it, Luke. It's just a small thing. We want Noah's wedding to be special, you know? Another loan? You can't be serious," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. I felt a mix of shock, anger, and hurt all at once. Here I was, thinking we were finally free from the burden of debt, and now they were about to dive right back into it, this time for a wedding. My mom came over to join us, sensing the tension, and she immediately went on the defensive. "Luke, it's just a little help for Noah. You know how much he means to us. It's his wedding, for heaven's sake. We want it to be a day he'll never forget." "But you couldn't afford my college tuition without a loan," I snapped, feeling the frustration boiling over. "And now you're borrowing money for a wedding?" "Luke, honey," my mom said softly, "this is a family decision. We're all contributing here. We'll make it work." A family decision? I wanted to laugh, or maybe cry. They'd never consulted me about it. I was just expected to be okay with this decision, to support it, as though my years of sacrifice didn't matter. They brushed off my anger like it was some minor inconvenience. I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't help myself. So let me get this straight. You're telling me I need to be okay with you taking out another loan after I've spent nearly a decade paying off your debts? My dad put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, this isn't about you. It's about family. We want Noah to be happy." I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. Family? What about my happiness? Did I even matter to them outside of being a financial backup? The worst part was that they genuinely didn't seem to understand why I was upset. They looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was causing drama over something trivial. My mom even threw in a line about how Noah's still young and that he deserves to enjoy this special moment. And there I was, the older brother who'd apparently outlived his right to any special moments. I didn't know what to say after that. I was hurt, furious, and, honestly, devastated. All those years I'd spent helping them out, all the sacrifices I'd made, suddenly felt like they meant nothing. They expected me to just go along with this, like I was some sort of lifeline they could tap into whenever they wanted. I ended up leaving that night without another word. I just needed to get out of there, to clear my head. Since then, I've been trying to figure out how to approach this. Part of me wants to yell at them, to make them see how unfair they're being. But another part of me wonders if they'll ever really understand. Maybe they don't see what I've done for them as anything special. Maybe they just see it as my duty, the role I'm supposed to play. I don't know what to do. Should I confront them and risk driving a wedge between us? Should I keep quiet and let them go through with this, even if it means I'll have to pick up the pieces later? Right now, I feel like I'm being forced to choose between my own happiness and the family I've worked so hard to protect. And I don't know if I can keep sacrificing myself for them, especially if they can't see, or don't care about, the weight of what I've already given. After that night, I couldn't shake the frustration boiling inside me. Every time I tried to relax or even sleep, I'd end up replaying that conversation with my parents. They were so casual about it, so oblivious to everything I'd given up. I'd spent years sacrificing my own dreams, and they were now choosing to put themselves, and, let's be honest, me, right back in the hole we'd just climbed out of. It's like my sacrifices had been erased in one decision. I tried to clear my head by taking a walk and ended up meeting my friend Tyler, who's known me since high school. Tyler's a good guy, level-headed, and probably one of the few people who actually understood what I'd been through all these years. We grabbed some coffee, and after a bit of small talk, I finally told him about my parents' latest decision. Tyler's face fell when I told him. "Are you serious, man?" he asked, frowning. "After everything you did for them?" I nodded, clenching my jaw. They're taking out another loan, just to give Noah the perfect wedding, and they called it a family decision. Didn't even think to ask me, just expected me to be fine with it. Tyler shook his head in disbelief. "Dude, that's messed up. I mean, you spent years busting your ass to help them out, and now they're just going back to square one?" "Exactly," I muttered. "It's like they forgot everything I did. And the worst part? They don't even think I have a right to be angry. They actually looked at me like I was overreacting, like I was being selfish or something." Tyler let out a low whistle. "You know, you're probably the only person I know who'd even agree to help pay off someone else's debt in the first place. You have every right to be upset, Luke." Hearing it from him was validating. Sometimes, when you're deep in it, you can't tell if you're being unreasonable or if the world around you is just skewed. But Tyler's reaction reminded me that my feelings weren't out of line. The thing is, my whole life I'd been conditioned to be the responsible one. Growing up, my parents always leaned on me more, even though I was only 3 years older than Noah. They made me feel like I had to be the stable one so that he could have room to be whatever he wanted to be. It was like they were grooming me to pick up the slack wherever they fell short. I think back to some of the things I gave up over the years. In my mid-20s, when everyone else was traveling, dating, and exploring, I was working extra shifts, sending whatever I could back to my parents. I gave up a few relationships because I could never prioritize them over my family. I even passed up a huge promotion at work because it would have required relocating. I couldn't just leave and abandon them with all that debt. And where was Noah during all this? Living his best life. He traveled. He experimented with different jobs. He even dabbled in music and art for a bit. while I was playing responsible adult, so he didn't have to. Sure, he'd have his own challenges here and there, but my parents never held him accountable for any of it. If anything, they encouraged his lifestyle, always saying things like, "Oh, he'll figure it out eventually." I tried not to resent him. Really, I did. I've always felt more responsible for my family than Noah ever did, and he can't help who he is. But as more time passed, the unfairness of it became harder to ignore. Noah and I are close enough that we'll grab a drink now and then, so a few nights after my conversation with Tyler, I invited him out. We met up at a bar near his apartment, one of those trendy spots with overpriced cocktails that he seems to love. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I explained my perspective, he'd get it. We ordered drinks, and I dove right in. "So, I heard about Mom and Dad's plan to take out a loan for your wedding." Noah gave me a sheepish grin. "Yeah, they really want to make it special. Maya's parents are covering some costs, but you know how our folks are." I held my drink, trying to keep my voice calm. "Noah, they just finished paying off their last debt. With my help, I spent years covering for them, sacrificing things in my own life to get them out of the red. And now they're putting themselves, and by extension, me, right back in it." He laughed, a short, uncomfortable chuckle. "Luke, come on. It's just money. And it's not like they're asking you to pay for the wedding. They just want to help me out. It's not just money when I've spent years putting my life on hold to help them with that exact issue," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "And it kind of feels like they're expecting me to step up again if things go south. They made this decision without even thinking about what it would mean for me." Noah sighed, swirling his drink. "Look, I get that you've done a lot for them. But dude, you didn't have to. You chose to." I stared at him, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Are you serious? I chose to help them because they were drowning, and they needed me. You weren't exactly stepping up." Noah shrugged, looking a bit annoyed now. "I mean, not my fault you decided to play parent for them. I have my own life, Luke. And just because you decided to be the family's financial hero doesn't mean I owe you something. Besides, it's their choice if they want to take out a loan." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So, you're okay with them sinking into more debt for you? After everything I've done, you can just brush it off like this?" He rolled his eyes. "Luke, I'm just trying to live my life. Not everyone wants to be the family martyr. If you want to be upset about it, that's on you, man." I couldn't believe it. I had hoped he'd understand, maybe even see my side. Instead, he was dismissing my years of sacrifice like they meant nothing. Like I'd somehow made a stupid decision he wasn't responsible for. I walked out of the bar without saying goodbye, feeling a mixture of anger and heartbreak. For the first time, it hit me just how alone I was in this family. My parents didn't see my sacrifices as anything special, and my brother viewed me as some uptight martyr who decided to take on burdens that he felt no responsibility for. It was like all those years had been rewritten in my mind. Suddenly, every sacrifice felt hollow, like I'd been holding up a family that never actually saw me. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything I'd done. Was this what I got for being responsible? For caring more than anyone else seemed to? I'd sacrificed relationships, stability, dreams, and for what? The next morning, I decided I needed to confront my parents directly. I had to know if they really understood or cared about everything I'd done, because if they didn't, I needed to start rethinking my place in this family before they drained me dry and walked away without a second thought. But deep down, I was afraid of what I might find out. I woke up the next day with my decision clear. I was going to have it out with my parents. I needed to know, once and for all, if they genuinely valued my sacrifices or if I was just a convenient source of support they could rely on. I waited until that evening, after work, before driving over. My mom was surprised to see me at the door, but she welcomed me in warmly, asking if I'd had dinner. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Can we talk?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She hesitated, sensing something was up, but she called my dad in, and we all sat down in the living room. My parents looked at me expectantly, oblivious to the frustration and hurt I was carrying. "Mom, Dad," I started, trying to keep my tone steady, I know about the loan you're planning to take out for Noah's wedding, and I need to understand why you think that's a good idea." They exchanged a glance, and my mom sighed, as if I were being difficult. "Look, we already explained," she said in that soothing tone she'd always used when she thought I was overreacting. "It's a wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment for Noah and Maya. We want to make it special for them." I clenched my fists, doing my best to keep calm. "I get that, Mom. I really do. But do you not understand what that debt will do to you? We just spent years paying everything off, and I spent a huge chunk of my life helping you with that." My dad leaned forward, his face serious. "Luke, you're acting like this is some kind of betrayal. It's not. We're just trying to do something nice for Noah. We want him to have the kind of wedding he deserves. And what about what I deserve?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was too far gone to hold back. "Do you have any idea what I sacrificed for this family? The things I put on hold, the opportunities one turned down? And now, you're risking everything again, just so Noah can have a perfect day?" My mom's expression softened, but there was a hint of irritation in her eyes. "Luke, you chose to help us. You were always so responsible, always the one we could count on. And yes, we're grateful for everything you did, but Noah's still finding his way. He's younger, and this wedding is important to him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, just because I'm responsible, you feel entitled to let me handle all the tough stuff while you continue to let Noah live without any of the responsibilities I've had to bear?" "It's not like that," my dad said, looking increasingly frustrated. "You know that we love you both equally. This is just one thing we want to do for him, Luke." "It's not just one thing," I countered, my voice rising. "It's a pattern. I'm the one who stayed, the one who helped when you needed it. And now, you're just asking me to be okay with you going back to square one, acting like everything I did was just disposable." My dad threw his hands up. "Luke, you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. We're talking about your brother's wedding here. Can't you just let him have this?" I felt my face flush with anger. Let him have this? I let him have his 20s while I sacrificed my own. I'm almost 30, and what do I have to show for it? A barely used savings account, no property, no stability. All because I put this family's needs first. At that, my mom looked hurt, but there was also something else. Disappointment? "Look," she said softly, "I thought you'd be happy for Noah. I thought you'd understand." It was like talking to a brick wall. They simply could not, or would not, see my side. To them, I was the responsible one, the one they'd come to rely on. It seemed I wasn't even supposed to have feelings about it. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my voice steady. "So that's it? You're just going to take out this loan and expect me to pick up the pieces if things fall apart?" My mom looked at me like she didn't quite recognize me. "Of course not, Luke. You're not responsible for this. It's our choice. We'll handle it." "That's what you said last time," I pointed out. "And then who was there to help you when you couldn't handle it?" "Me. I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired of being the one who has to pick up after everyone else." Silence fell over the room. My dad looked down, his jaw tight, while my mom's eyes shone with tears. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they finally understood. But then my dad spoke. "Luke, we get that you're upset, but we're asking you to trust us on this. This is a happy time, and we don't want to ruin it with arguments." There it was again, that total dismissal of my feelings, as if my concerns were just an inconvenience, something to sweep aside in the name of family harmony. They weren't seeing this as the betrayal it felt like to me. They just wanted me to swallow it, smile, and move on. Feeling defeated, I stood up, not wanting to continue the conversation. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "Do what you want, but don't expect me to help this time. If you're choosing to take on this debt for Noah's wedding, I'm out. I'm done paying for your decisions." My dad opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I walked out the door, leaving them both sitting there in stunned silence. The drive home was a blur. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like everything I'd worked for was unraveling. I thought maybe they'd see my point if I explained it, but it was clear now that nothing I said would change their minds. They didn't want my perspective. They wanted my obedience. That night, I lay awake, wondering if maybe I was the one who'd been blind all these years. Maybe I'd convinced myself I was helping my family when, in reality, I'd just been enabling them to keep making terrible decisions. My mind raced with all the times I'd handed over my paycheck, reassured them when they were stressed, turned down opportunities to stay close to home. It was like watching a slow-motion replay of every mistake I'd made for their sake. And the worst part? Noah didn't care, and my parents didn't think he should have to. In their eyes, I was supposed to be the dutiful son, picking up the slack without a word. Noah, on the other hand, was allowed to live freely, without consequences. I'd been so focused on helping that I never stopped to ask myself if they even appreciated it. The next day, I got a text from Noah, casual as ever. "Hey man, Mom said you were upset last night. Hope everything's cool. Can't wait for the wedding." I stared at the message, my anger flaring up all over again. How could he be so oblivious? It was like he lived in a different reality, one where everything magically worked out, where family just existed to support him. For the first time, I started seriously thinking about pulling away from them. For years, I'd been the reliable one, the fixer, the problem solver. But I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who didn't care enough to even ask if I was okay. The idea of setting boundaries terrified me. My family had always been my foundation, even when it was built on uneven ground. But now, I wondered if I could survive without them. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about being seen for who I was and what I'd done. And if they couldn't give me that, then maybe I needed to start looking out for myself. I didn't reply to Noah's message. Instead, I spent the next few days avoiding my family, trying to process everything. I needed to make a choice. Keep sacrificing myself for a family that would never understand, or finally take a stand and reclaim the life I'd given up so long ago. Over the next few days, I avoided my family completely. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't drop by, and for once, I tried to focus on myself. But the silence only gave me more time to think, and the more I thought, the angrier I became. I'd spent years bending over backward for them, sacrificing my own happiness and stability, and now I was supposed to be okay with them diving back into debt, just to throw a party for Noah. It was insulting, really. Finally, I decided I couldn't just leave things hanging. If they wanted me to keep playing this role, they were going to have to hear me out and respect my boundaries. So, I went over to my parents' house one last time, determined to have a serious conversation. No more sidestepping or brushing my feelings aside. This time, I was going to make it clear that things had to change. When I arrived, my mom greeted me at the door with a smile, as if nothing was wrong. She tried to chat casually, but I cut her off. "Mom, I didn't come here for small talk. We need to have a serious discussion, as a family." My mom's face fell, and she called my dad into the living room. They both sat down, looking tense, but I was done playing the good son who would just swallow everything. This time, they were going to listen. "Look," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you both to understand where I'm coming from. For years, I've been there for you. I sacrificed my time, my money, my future, everything, to help you out of debt. And now, you're planning to go right back into it for Noah's wedding? Do you not see how wrong that is?" My mom sighed, looking frustrated. "Luke, we've been over this. We just want Noah to have a beautiful wedding. It's a one-time thing. Can't you just be happy for him?" I clenched my jaw. "Of course I want Noah to be happy, Mom. But it's not fair for you to keep putting yourselves, and by extension, me, into financial jeopardy. I just want you to consider the consequences, not just for yourselves, but for me, too. This isn't something I can just stand by and support." My dad shook his head, visibly annoyed. "Luke, we're not asking you to pay for anything. We're handling this on our own. You don't need to get involved." "But that's the point, Dad." I shot back, unable to hold back anymore. "You say you don't need me involved, but every time things go wrong, who ends up helping? Me. I end up picking up the pieces. I'm the one who's always there to bail you out. And frankly, I'm tired of it." My dad's face hardened. "So what are you saying, Luke? That you're done with us? That you don't want to help your family anymore?" "I'm saying that I'm tired of being expected to fix everything," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm tired of putting my life on hold so that everyone else can do whatever they want. I've sacrificed enough." My mom's eyes filled with tears, but there was something steely behind them. "I thought you cared about this family, Luke. After everything we've done for you, you're just going to turn your back on us because we want to do something nice for Noah? Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "What have you done for me lately? All I've done is give, and all you do is take. When is it going to be my turn, Mom? When do I get to start living my own life?" My dad's face flushed with anger. "We're your parents, Luke. We raised you. We gave you everything we could. And yes, maybe we relied on you more than Noah, but that's because you were always the dependable one. You can't just throw that back in our faces now." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "You're right," I said quietly. "I am dependable. And I've been dependable because I thought it would mean something to you, that you'd respect what I've done. But it's clear that you don't. I'm just a safety net to you. A way to clean up the messes when things go wrong." My mom's voice shook as she said, "So what? You're just going to walk away? You're going to abandon your family over some money?" "It's not just about money, Mom," I replied. "It's about respect. It's about valuing what I've done. And if you can't see that, then maybe I do need to step away." There was a long, heavy silence. My parents looked at each other, and then my dad spoke up again, his voice tight. "Well, if that's how you feel, Luke, maybe it's time you stop coming around altogether. We don't need someone who's going to keep throwing our mistakes back in our faces." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's best if I take a step back." I could feel the tension thickening in the room as my words sank in. For the first time, I was setting a boundary, and they didn't like it. They wanted me to be the dutiful son, quietly picking up the slack while they took my sacrifices for granted. "Well, fine then," my mom said, her voice laced with bitterness. "If that's how you feel, don't expect us to come running to you when you finally need help." I wanted to laugh at the irony. When have I ever asked you for anything? The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at them one last time, realizing that any lingering hope I'd had for them to understand was gone. They were too wrapped up in their own sense of entitlement to see what they'd done. They didn't see me as a person with his own dreams and needs. I was just the dependable son, the one they could lean on whenever they felt like it. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the house. I could feel their eyes on me as I left, but I didn't look back. I'd spent years giving everything to them, and now I'd finally reached my limit. In the days that followed, I felt a strange mixture of freedom and sadness. I hadn't fully cut ties with my family, but I'd made it clear that I was done being their safety net. For the first time in years, I started thinking about what I wanted for my own life, not what was expected of me. At work, I finally accepted an offer to relocate to another city. It was a promotion, and it meant I'd be leaving behind the place I'd called home for so long. But I was ready. I needed a fresh start, a way to put some distance between myself and the family dynamics that had held me back for so long. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years as I'd poured all my energy into supporting my parents. I even started going out on weekends, doing things just for me for once. It felt strange, almost like I was rediscovering who I was. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. The guilt was still there, lingering in the background, whispering that I'd abandoned my family. I kept wondering if I'd gone too far, if I should have tried harder to make them understand. But every time I started doubting myself, I remembered the look on their faces, the entitlement in their voices. They didn't see my sacrifices as anything special. They saw them as a given, something they were owed. Then, just as I was starting to feel like I could finally move forward, I got a call from my mom. I stared at her name on the screen, hesitating before finally answering. Part of me hoped she'd call to apologize, to tell me she'd thought about what I said and that she understood my perspective. But of course, that wasn't what she wanted. "Look," she said, her voice clipped. "I hate to ask this, but we're having some issues with the bank. It's just temporary, but we need a little help to get things back on track." I felt a wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. They hadn't learned anything. Even after our confrontation, even after I'd made it clear that I was done being their financial lifeline, they were still trying to pull me back in. "Mom," I said, my voice barely holding steady. I told you I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not your backup plan. There was a long pause, and then she sighed. I thought you'd changed your mind by now. I thought you'd understand that family helps each other. I couldn't take it anymore. No, Mom. What I understand is that you only call me when you need something. You don't care about what I want or need. You just care about what I can do for you. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Fine, she snapped. If that's how you feel, then don't expect us to be there for you either. The words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. You've never been there for me, I replied quietly, and then I hung up. For the first time, I felt like I'd finally let go. The sadness was still there, but it was overshadowed by a sense of relief. I was done being their crutch, their endless source of support. For once, I was putting myself first, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. After that final call with my mom, I felt strangely at peace, as if I'd finally closed a chapter that had haunted me for years. I'd spent so much time giving to my family, sacrificing my own happiness and future to help them stay afloat. Now, for the first time in my life, I was free from that weight. I moved to the new city, taking the promotion that I'd turned down so many times before. It was surreal. I found a small apartment downtown, just big enough for me and the life I was building from scratch. I started filling my days with things I'd never had time for before, joining a local gym, exploring restaurants, meeting new people. I even reconnected with some old friends, people I hadn't been able to prioritize in years. The guilt still lingered sometimes, like a shadow in the back of my mind. But each day, it grew fainter, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. I'd spent so long holding my breath, always waiting for the next family crisis. Now, I was finally breathing freely, learning to live for myself. One evening, as I was settling in with a book, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw a text from Noah. Hey man, haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're good. The wedding's next month. Would love to see you there. I stared at the message, torn between the life I'd built for myself and the family that had never fully understood my sacrifices. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect this peace I'd found. But another part of me wondered if going back, even just for a day, might be the closure I needed. After a long moment, I put my phone down, uncertain but unburdened. The decision could wait. For now, I was finally free to live on my own terms.